All right, boys and girls. Oh, my mic is over here. What's going on? All right, boys and girls. Welcome to the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast on the real life on the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. I know I'm off of my game. I'm kind of tired. I've been working a lot today. Heat is killing me. I'm working a lot of outdoor stuff. So, anyways, welcome once again to the real life on the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. Thank you for coming. We're gonna have a great episode for you today. Jeff Malott from the Kayak Bass Nation is going to join me. And, we're going to be talking a lot about kind of piggyback out of the podcast that Dan Perry and I recorded for his segment, The Advanced Kayak Anglers. That was a week ago. We had a lot of positive feedback about that episode. In the short history of Bass Kayak and Beers and the Advanced Kayak Angler, it became the most popular episode in like less than a week. That's not saying much. We just started in January, to be honest with you. But it does tell me that you guys enjoy this kind of topics. We want to kind of piggyback off it and continue talking about it. I know the Advanced Kayak Angler is more centered around teaching techniques and all that. So we figured, this would be a good subject to continue on my segment, the real life, which is more based on, the life trials of the tournament anglers and content creators. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. If you didn't listen to the episode, we're talking. It was titled. What was it titled? I know how to. It was a big deal with the title. Oh, kayak fishing, is kayak fishing dead? It was a question. And we really were talking about the between the advancements in technology and the rule changes on the national trails. It seems like it's really squeezing, as Dan put it, the little guy or the anglers that kind of traditionally fish, with a paddle, skinny waters, and all that. And that is a valid point. Dan had a saw it one way, I saw it the other. But I do have to admit, reading the feedbacks and that we got through text messages, through Spotify, through our social media, which, by the way, you can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and the Bass Kayak and Beers. It seems like there's a lot of you out there that feel like Dan is feeling that this trails and technology is taken away from the essence of kayak fishing. So I didn't think there were that many of you out there that felt that way. So I do apologize. Even if I don't see things the same way other people do, I do realize I have a responsibility as a podcaster for the community to amplify their voice, whether they agree with it or not, and talk about it without having to disrespect somebody else's opinion, result to insults or just dismissing the other opinion. That's my take on it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about some of the rule changes that on the national trail that have taken place in the last, I guess, weeks or month that kind of went under the radar. I didn't know about it, and it raised some questions in the last few, I guess, the last Bassmaster Kayak Series and Possum Kingdom, and the last national trail for the Hobie POS. So there's some interesting stuff there that Jeff is gonna kind of like fill us in, and we'll talk about it. So again, if you have any questions for my special guest or for myself, Jeff Malott, feel free to put them on the comment section. We'll try to do our best to answer those questions. And again, feel free to share this video on, whether it's on Facebook, on YouTube. And if you're listening to our MP3 formats, we do appreciate it. If you don't mind, and you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to give us your 5-star reviews if you feel so kind to. So that really does help with the growth of the podcast. Growth. What's going on? Growth. I'm sorry, I'm really tired today. So, anyways, let's bring in our special guest, Jeff Malott. Jeff, how you doing, buddy?
What's up, man? I'm tired too.
Man, I've been doing a lot of my new job is really outdoors today. This heat is killing me here in Texas today. So, but anyways, nobody wants to hear me whine about my old age. By the way, you turned 50. How do you feel? Do you feel like a 50-year-old?
Yeah, man. I got immediately the next door. I was more sore, gassier, limping around. No, it's weird. It's kind of surreal. Grandpa turned 50. My oldest boy is about to turn 30, which is even weirder. So,
wow. I actually, like 2 weeks ago, I turned 49. I don't feel older, but
No,
well, my mind doesn't, but my body thinks I went to hell or something because
yeah, yeah.
it's
Everything takes longer to get over, doesn't it? Like you hurt something, and now
exactly.
instead of 2 days, it's 2 weeks.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially on tournaments, man. Doing 2 practice days and then a 2 day tournament is not as much fun. Before I start in, let's give a shout out to some of the listeners. Fishing is life. What's up? First time listener. Welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy, man. I hope you can coming back for it. If you have a questions, feel free to ask away. And Nicholas Myers was a great episode. Really enjoy hearing both sides. That's referring to the last episode. Really appreciate it, Nicholas. I hope you enjoyed this one too as well. And again, if you have any questions for myself or my special guest, Jeff Malott. If you don't know Jeff, he's kind of like a legend in the nation.
No,
How are things in the Kayak Bass Nation? Tell us, for those that haven't listened or heard, your live show or your social media. Tell us a little bit about the Kayak Bass Nation.
man, Ryan and I have now been doing that. We're coming up on episode 200 of the podcast, believe it or not. We just do it once a week, and for a while, the first few years, we didn't even do it once a week, but we do it once a week. Monday nights, we go live. We have a great time with it. My partner Ryan Lambert and I, and like I said, we're coming up on episode 200. It's been going really good. The audio podcast is growing. The video podcast is growing. We're adding some new shows to the deal. It's a lot of fun, man. I heard what you were saying earlier, the responsibility of podcasters. I always say podcasters, we're kayak fishing's, Sports Illustrated or ESPN. Nobody else talks about this. It's just us. I mean, if we don't talk about it, nobody will. So that's kind of our job on KBN, kind of what you're doing. So yeah, it's good times. It's going well over there.
Well, and again, we do appreciate what you do in the Kayak Bass Nation. You also have the group page. People can join. You should probably put a disclaimer on that, kind of give a heads up on what they'll be facing if
They're
they
used
join.
to, people are used to it now. Elon Musk made free speech live on Twitter, and we were pre Elon with the free speech over on Kayak Bass Nation.
You guys were trailblazers for sure.
Yeah.
So before we start, I have to ask you. I know you're a huge basketball fan. Did you watch anything of the NBA Finals? Did you like them? Did you enjoy it?
I had no dog in the fight, but I found myself pulling for Denver. I like Jokic. He's kind of a throwback player with some new school skills. Denver's never won a championship, so I was down to see that. But I like Miami too. So it was a great, to me, it was great basketball. I know everybody wanted to see Celtics, Lakers, whatever, but I thought it was great basketball, even though it was 4-1 series. It was really fun to watch for me.
It was all games, I think, except for maybe one or two, were competitive. I grew up watching Larry Bird, McHale, and Robert Parrish, so I'm a huge Celtics fan. But it gets me upset watching this brand of basketball now, which the Celtics are playing, which is just like, it's not team basketball. No. I love Jason Tatum. This is an amazing player, but it's just, there's no team in it.
They should have already won a ring with the talent.
Well, I don't think I want to say they won because they're both young. They're like 26 and 25.
Amen.
LeBron didn't win until he was 27. Same with Steph Curry. Same with Michael Jordan. I'll give it 2 more years before I say they should have won.
I think they're done. I think they blow up the Celtics this year.
Nah.
I think Jaylen Brown's gone. I think somebody else is probably gone.
Well, too. I don't want to dive too much because we want to stick to it, but I think
it's basketball, baby. It's basketball.
I know, but I think it's like what I do research a lot on it. It's not financially because they can't trade him,
right?
If he resigns, and if he resigns with another team, he gets a lot less money. So,
all right. So after this, Mondo, we're starting a basketball podcast separate. Let's do it.
I'll be down with that.
The OGs, yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the subjects that Dan and I were talking about last week. What are your thoughts on it? Like, what did you agree or disagree with, and what did you wanted to bring to the table?
I sent you a message I asked to come on here to argue with Dan because I completely disagree with him. 100% disagree with him on his take on the paddlers getting left behind, on the boundaries versus designated launches. Disagree with all of it. And this is coming from a guy, I've been doing this since 2011, fishing kayak tournaments. And I was a paddle guy, won a lot of tournaments paddling, probably won more tournaments paddling than I have pedaling or motoring. And I was anti-pedal when the pedal drives came out. No pedal drives, get out of here, And then when the motors started coming around, I was like, that's too far. We don't need motors. and now I've had a motorboat too. So I think that's all just part of the wave of I hate to call it progress, but these people aren't in this sport to become kayakers. They're bass fishermen. So the paddle was just a nuisance until something better came along. That's kind of how I felt about it.
I think the what I do think is that I don't call what we do now, even though we call it kayak fishing, and the podcast is Bass Kayak and Beers. When we get down to tournaments, when we start adding pedal drive, and then motors, pedal drives kind of change it from being man powered to motor powered, technology driven. And when you look at live scope for fishing, I'm not against any of it. I'm not against progress, if that's what it is. I just reluctantly call it kayak fishing because that's what everybody's calling. But I don't view it as we're no longer doing kayak fishing. To me, the essence of kayak fishing was gone a couple of years ago. That's my take on it. Not that I'm hating on it. Again, I'm not hating on the progress. I'm super happy with the way kayak fishing has progressed. If we want to still call it kayak fishing, when you think about kayak fishing, was invented in somewhere in, I think it was Sweden, hundreds of years ago. Obviously, rods and reels weren't around by that time, but ancestors used it for like hunting and all that. It was paddle and a kayak, and that remained unchanged for like hundreds of years until recently. It's not even recognizable anymore as far as what it originally started with.
Right.
That part I agree with.
Yeah, I mean, we're fishing from small plastic watercraft, and I know they're still sold as kayaks, branded as kayaks. Johnny just said I saw in the comments there, but these guys, I mean, if you go out and ask these guys about paddle stroke technique or how to manage current in a kayak paddling or something, nobody, I mean, I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing 80-90% of the people in these tournaments wouldn't have a clue about that. They just have a paddle because they have to have one. They're out there to fish. So now on the other side of that, what Dan was saying, talking about you're leaving the little guy behind, so on and so on. The little guy still has a chance, even with the defined launches. And I know he disagrees with that too. We can talk about the launches later. They still have a chance. It's just, do you want to attack? It's going to be a lot more work, but you have a chance. I mean, Russ Snyder's is top 10 in the BOS right now. He paddles.
Russ Snyder paddles?
He paddles an attack for the BOS events. He has a Torpedo for the bass events.
He doesn't use a pedal drive. He's no longer using the name. Really?
No, when I fished with him on Caddo, he launched with me and he took off in that attack paddling. Now he may have a different, he may have a radar that he pedals sometimes too. I don't know, but he does paddle some because he did it at Caddo. I saw him do it. And he's in that top 10. And Drew has won the BOS. This was pre rule change.
Well, yeah, that was pre rules. Yeah.
Some other guys like on Dardanelle a couple years ago, a guy won the BOS event paddling. Paddling is still a thing. It's kind of like the Keith Poche thing in the Bass Elites or the Opens. You can win it in a small boat. You're going to get beat to death on the big water. You're going to get beat to death on the main lake. If you're willing to sacrifice a lot of stuff and do some things, you can still have success in a small boat or in a paddle boat. In our case, a paddle kayak. It's just going to be a lot more work. I don't think they're left behind. I just think you're leaving yourself behind if you choose to stay in a paddle kayak. That's what I think.
No, I agree with you on some of that. I do think that it severely handicaps a paddler. That's the honest truth. Why do you think it was? And first of all, I agree with the rule changes. I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not debating this point. And fishing is life. I'll get to that question in a moment. The question that I have you posted there. But before that, why was the need for the rule changes in your mind?
Well, it's one thing. We all need to fish the water that's on the title of the tournament. Like if Lake Dardanelle's the title of the tournament, Lake Dardanelle Bassmaster, let's say, then by God, I think we all ought to stick a foot in that lake at some point during the tournament. And before the rule change, people weren't doing that. People were fishing different ecosystems completely off the lake. And I'm not calling them cheaters because it wasn't against the rules. It's just what they were doing. So that's why the rule needed to be changed. Now, I know that some of the folks think that should have been changed to a boundary within the lake, but I don't like that either. I like the hard designated launches. That's what I like.
Why would you? And again, asking the questions. Why do you like the one? Why you prefer one versus the other? What was the
Well, I
reason?
mean, there's so many stories in the past of when it was just public launch. Okay, people, hand roping boats off of bridges and going behind private property and no trespassing areas, and there's no way to police that. Even with boundaries, if you're drawing red lines on a Google map through some uh, woods or across a bridge or across a creek or whatever, uh, you can't dial that in down on ground level necessarily. And then all that land in between that boundary, you're not policing if people are sliding in where they're not supposed to be in those no trespassing areas, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Um, Now, and also the boundaries would never have been good enough. I guarantee you, if they'd have drawn a line around the lake, the people that wanted the boundaries would have said, well, they're not far enough. They're not far enough up Creek
Yeah.
X. They're not far enough out on this lake. And that would have been a huge problem too. So when you just say, here's your launches, here's 25 launches, have at it. Now we're all on equal playing field. Nobody gets an advantage for having an extra month off to go drive every forest road in the country and find secret put-ins. I mean, for example, now this was before the rule change at the KBF National Championship. There were people getting no trespassing tickets. Police were called on people. I mean, this was happening to people because they were using private areas to access water for the practice time of the tournament to get ready for the tournament. You shouldn't be doing all that. And defined launches cleans it up. It takes out the gray area, completely cleans it up. That's why I like them.
And what about? And I'm, kind of like compromise. What would you say about, okay, let's do designated launches, let's not do boundaries, but let's allow portaging as long as you launch from the designated boat ramps?
100% agree with that. I wish they would have done that. I think once you put in, if you put in on the lake that we're supposed to be fishing, and if you want to put in the work 3 hours up some creek and drag over trees, I think you should be allowed to do that. They didn't do that, but I wish they would have done that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, that's why I think this is the way I think the misconception is of why the rule changes. In my opinion, the rule changes. The heart of the problem, along with what everything you said, was when people redefined what is accessible. Somebody with great paddling skills would look at a laydown of a tree sticking out 3 or 4 feet, from one side of the creek to the other above the water, and would say, "Oh, that's accessible to me because I have a smaller craft and I'm a in a great athletic forms and I'm a world class paddler," which is true. It might be true. But my problem is like once you make that statement that you no longer have to go through that particularly laydown because you interpret it as that's not in makes it inaccessible for me. That I think that was the real problem. People would say, "Oh, well, it's accessible to me." Well, did you go over it?
Yeah,
No.
that's the thing is how would you know if you're not starting on the lake?
Exactly.
And if, frankly, some of the places people were fishing, even if there was no obstructions, you wouldn't have the time to get up there.
Yeah.
Even if it was free flowing water with no laydowns, there's no way you could have made it there just paddling up the creek or even motoring up the creek. You're not going 20 miles, you know what I mean? Or 25 miles, 30 miles. You're not making it there from the main lake in a kayak. So that makes it inaccessible to me too. There's no way you can make it there in that amount of time and back. So that was the defined launches, and that's why I was okay with that. But I'm with you. I wish they would have allowed portaging.
Yeah, I think that is kind of like maybe a happy medium that kind of gives something back to the paddlers, kind of gives them a little bit more of an edge. Because of course, if you're on whether it's a Crescent Shoaley or Jackson Coosa or uh, the new Bonafide River 11, that's an advantage now you have over an Old Town PDL or a PA 360 where you log, portaging with that is a nightmare with any of those two craft that I just, I've done it, and it's, just for when I'm going creek fishing, not for tournaments. But so that kind of like, okay, now you have an edge wherever you want to fish, and then it kind of helps out both sides. And I think a lot of times we have to give credit to the tournament directors like AJ and Steve Owen. It's not an easy job. This is a new sport that it's in its infancies with a dynamic that very different from basketball. Like we don't have a blueprint. Like MLF had a blueprint from Bassmaster to kind of build MLF. You know, they tweaked the rules to make it a little bit more interesting, but there was a blueprint. Like we don't have a blueprint for kayak fishing. CPR, with what tournament? There's no tournament anywhere where you use a CPR format that we can blueprint out of it. There's no, you know, kayak fishing blueprint that we can use. It's more like we're learning as we go. You get the feedback from the anglers, you make the changes, and you try to make as much people happy as you can. You're not going to make everybody happy, of course. Before we continue, I do want to answer what's a good maintenance on a fin pedal drive. What do you think about that? What is a good maintenance on a fin pedal drive?
You get rid of that and get you a prop drive.
No, keep the fin pedal drive. Good maintenance would be, I think, what people make a lot of mistakes is start throwing WD-40 and some of those lubricants that are more penetrant. That people, you know, it lubricates, but at the same time, it kind of liquefies the grease that's over that's on. They're meant to protect, so don't use kind of like WD-40 or anything like that. If you have to take it apart and grease it, and you're gonna have to do it at some point. Just make sure you don't do any of those lubricants that just kind of like dilute the grease on it. And also, God, Daniel Perry has a message for you. I think he was scared of you. That's why he bring you on board.
No, Dan's cool, man.
Nah, he's
I
a
like
good guy.
I like Dan's takes on everything. I just, you know, I had opposite opinion on a lot of the stuff. But you know, I got to thinking about the portaging thing. I think if they allowed that, you might see people showing up with multiple boats. You might see even the guys with the giant Hobies showing up with a paddle yak just in case they wanted to get back on, you know, some past some thick lay down or beaver dam or something, and they were allowed to do that. You might see them show up with an extra boat.
The question surely it is. I did it. I tried it on iCast last year. It is so Cooler Lid AP 120. It is a great, and it's designed by Drew Gregory. He's one of the best at it. What about the idea of maybe implementing on national trails a couple of river trails? Like, let's say instead of always going to a big lake, like sometimes like at more Susquehanna kind of events where usually you're
Yeah.
allowed to portage of it.
Yeah, everybody brings their smaller boats and inflatable boats and things like that. Yeah, I think that's cool. You just have to have the places to do that. You know, there's not that many rivers that can handle a big tournament like that. I know Three Rivers, they used to do a big one down in Georgia, the Three Rivers Throwdown. That could handle it. The Susky can handle it. They're doing the New River, which I've been told, I've never been there, that it's not quite as big. Could get a little crowded. But they could do, you know, a road. If anyone does road runner events in their areas where you go to multiple bodies of water, you could go to an area that had multiple rivers and say, hey, you can pick from these three. I mean, that could work. That'd be cool.
Ty, I agree with you. Dan is God sent to the podcast, so appreciate your kind words. Let's talk a little bit about, okay, so there were some rule changes that went to effect, and I wanted to talk about it because first of all, the rule changes were related more to communication. Tell us a little bit, because you know better than us. You kind of like on KBN went live with the rule changes, so but it's not really added to the rule books in the, at least in the Bassmaster kayak series. I don't know in the Hobie BOS if they updated the rules, but tell us a little bit about the rule changes and why that has happened regarding communication.
Yeah. So one of the rules that changed, and it kind of had everybody freaked out at the beginning of the year, was no communication. And the way that read was no communication on the water, like in person or electronic or whatever. No getting help from anyone off the water, of course. But what people interpret that as is like, I can't talk to anybody. Like,
Yeah,
I've got to stay away from people on the water. I cannot talk to them. Can't help them. Can't do anything like that. You know, people were kind of upset about it. Like, I thought that was part of the deal. We're going to socialize out there on the water. So anyway, we had Vinny Ferrari on the KBN Live podcast. And during the podcast, we thought or were afraid that he outed himself for breaking that rule live. He said, yeah, I saw the guy over there was not catching him, and I was killing him on this certain bait. So I went over to his boat and dropped the bait in his boat and said, here you go. And we thought, well, holy hell, the new rule, he just DQ'd himself. You know, he's done for. But lo and behold, he had cleared that with a TD before he did it. But that wasn't clearly spelled out in the rules.
Yeah.
So right after that, they made an addendum saying no. The rule is the essence of the rule is to not solicit information on the water. So if you and I are fishing together, I can say, "Hey, Armando, they're chomping a black frog back here in this grass," but you can't ask me, or I can't ask you. I can't solicit the information from you. That was the key. So they cleared that up in the latest addendum. Because I know
Yeah,
some
and
people got mad about the Possum Kingdom thing, and people out there fishing same spot.
so that's kind of on my point, because I had, first tournament of the year was Cattle Lake. I fished it, and I remember seeing Matthew Scott, which I hadn't seen. Matthew Scott got really sick with COVID, um, and it was bad for him. So I hadn't seen him. I messaged him like every week, just asking him how he was doing. So when I saw him on the water, I was like, "Oh man, nice to see you." So I paddled to him to say hi, and then I kind of realized halfway up, it's like, wait a minute. Even if I'm just saying hi, there's a lot of people around. People can misinterpret it. And we were just like, okay, never mind. I'll just keep pedaling. I'll say hi to you later. Um, and it really lessened the enjoyment at the, we were staying with Rolando Nandine and a couple of guys from Texas. Um, and it was kind of really awkward. Even at the house where we knew we can talk, we were like in tipsy, walking on eggshells. What can we say? What can we talk about? So I'm glad that got changed. I wish it would have kind of made it, a little bit more publicized. I know the KBN is probably the most popular kayak fishing podcast, especially for tournaments. But not everybody listens to the KBN podcast.
What?
Believe it or not, I know. Believe it or not. To me, it was confusing when I was listening to Steve Owens on the Possum Kingdom captain's meeting, and I felt he contradicted himself because he said, he said about the rules, but I don't remember him saying these are the new rules. He just stated out the rules, and I was like, well, wait a minute, that contradicts what the rule book says. But it didn't really affect me, so I was like, whatever. Now, after lines out on day one, we always have to, instead of the cooler talk at the office, the ramp talk after lines out.
Doc
And there,
talk, baby.
yeah, and there was a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of people. There was a couple of anglers that were kind of frustrated because they felt the same way. They're like, well, wait a minute, this what did Steve Owen means? And I think I love Steve Owens, and I couldn't find a defense. I would defend Steve Owens on anything. I would give him the benefit of the doubt, but I really had no leg to stand on because I had read the rule books. I didn't know about the addendum. So I was like, well, yeah, I don't know. I guess he did contradict himself. And then I listened to, by the way, great episode with Matt Coates, Joe, and Matty Hughes. Joe Coates hilarious, man. I enjoyed that one and the one for Dark Waters Kayak Fishing, Josh Smith. I think those have been my two favorite characters on the KBN podcast.
I miss Josh, man. He's come back.
I know, right? He's doing some jiu-jitsu stuff. He got tired of us. But so I heard, Joe and Matt talk about what they're doing. And in my mind, I was thinking, like, are they just DQing himself right now? Like, I thought that wasn't allowed. Now, unlike other people, I don't go to social media. I just message you directly because I don't. Then what if I'm wrong and I'm putting something out there that's gonna put a stain on Matt or Joe's reputation because I was not informed? And that's why I think people, if you want to comment, everybody's free to comment whatever they want, but try to do your research. So I was like, before I comment on this, before I go live, before I put it on any Facebook group, let me ask you and Jeff and Ryan about this. And you kind of explained it to me what had happened and why was he not DQ'd. So that's a good thing. I think that needed to be put in effect, that addendum, because it really, I think, lessened the enjoyment. Like it was like
made people
had
nervous.
to be like, it made people nervous on the water.
You don't want to be nervous out there. You want to relax. Now, the one thing they did keep, and this was the essence of the rule to begin with, I believe, is you can't electronically communicate with people on the water. So,
and that means text, or
that means anything. You can't get fishing knowledge from anybody electronically on the water. You especially can't solicit it. But if you and I are fishing the same area, we can communicate freely. I can't solicit it, but we can talk about whatever we want to talk about as far as just having a conversation. But I can't call Armando and say, hey, they're chomping a white flute back of pockets. You need to start throwing that. I can't do. You can't do that. And that has been a problem for years. And it wasn't cheating because it wasn't against the rules, but it still was something that people should not have been doing. It's a supposed to be somewhat of an individual sport. Now, if you're sharing a spot, like I said, we just talked about that. That's a whole different deal.
Why is it that I'm the one that always needs the help and you're the one always giving the information?
What?
Like when you make those examples, why is it that I'm the one that needs the help and you're the one that's helping
I
me?
don't know, man. I don't know.
Am I that bad of an angler?
Because I'm older.
By what? Well, actually,
Yeah.
like 12 months.
It's my grandfather and me trying to help.
Let me ask you this. Now, I've listened to your podcast and I follow you on social media. By the way, Richie Martinez, thanks, Richie, for saying hi. Thank you for listening and watching on Facebook. Really do appreciate it. Jeff, you've been one of the most outspoken. I don't mean that in a bad way. Um, about team fishing, the concept or stigma that people are helping each other out and kind of fishing as a team in the national trail, you did not like, and I agree with you. First and foremost, but going back to Possum Kingdom, and this is an honest question. I'm not challenging you on this, but I really want to know your take on it. What's the difference between what happened in Possum Kingdom and what you believe is ethically or against the rules?
Well, it's back to what I just talked about, which is the electronic communication. It's, being on a conference call with somebody and sharing with a group what's happening from a condition standpoint on different parts of the lake so that people can dial it in faster. That's what I mean by team fish. I mean, if you're all in the same spot, you're gonna, whether you talk or not, you're gonna kind of see what's going on and figure it out. That's not really team fishing, unless you're talking about. I mean, there's some stories a few years back of people playing defense and blocking areas off and things like that. But when I'm talking about team fishing, I'm talking about pooling information on the water using electronic communication. After hours, I mean, if you're all staying in the same house, you're gonna talk. I mean, you're gonna talk about and that may help or hurt you. I don't know. But electronic communication during the tournament, that's the thing that we wanted done away with.
I don't have. I agree with you on that. I think we both see it the same way. Going back to the Possum Kingdom, I don't have a problem with what Joe did and Matt Hughes did. I don't have a problem at all. I don't discredit them.
Marty Hughes.
Marty Hughes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't discredit them at all. I think that's well earned. I do wonder, and this is just my personal opinion, when we're talking about sharing the water, like what I think some people might consider unfair is, like, let's say Marty has dibs on the spot because he got there earlier. What is the ethics play on, like, okay, I'm gonna let Joe and Nick join in, but we're not gonna let anybody join in. In my opinion, like, there's rules that you have to be X amount of yards away from the other angler, and it's up to the angler that got to that spot first if he is willing to share your spot. In your opinion, when you open the door and say, okay, I'm going to share my spot with you, is it okay to not then share the spot with somebody else? And what's the difference between that and holding a spot for somebody else?
Yeah, I think their deal to me was pretty impressive, the way they were able to work that out, because I think a lot of times that would not go down like that. If someone else was sitting there first, there have been words and like, get out of here. I was here first. I don't care if you were here yesterday or not. But those guys worked it out, including working it out with the Canadian fellow that was there, or now Texan, Austin, Nick, I think his name was.
Nick, yeah.
Yeah. So those guys all worked it out, and that was impressive. And that's how it should go. You should be able to communicate and say, hey, I've got this area. You're 100 yards down this way. I'm right here. That's cool. I think that's good. Now, like you said, how do you differentiate that? Is that holding off other anglers? Are you walling off other anglers? I don't know. I mean, some of this comes down to common courtesy and etiquette. You know what I mean? If you roll up and you see three guys sitting there and they're like, look, man, we all pre-fished here, but we kind of came up with this deal. And, if you keep your distance, I mean, I don't know how that would go down. But it's the essence of all these rules that matters. And there was nothing nefarious going on. Those guys weren't scheming to try to do something illegal or anything like that. They actually did what you're supposed to do, which is talk and work it out and figure out where they were going to fish exactly, and made that work out, because a lot of times it doesn't go down like that. Like I said, people start cussing each other out. say something to your face nice and then go post on Facebook later and blast you. So, you never know, but they worked it out. So it was impressive.
No, and I think it was good camaraderie. And again, I don't have any problems with what they did. Congratulations on both of them. Um, it kind of like when the TOC with Brian Nelly and one of the Ewan brothers. I
Yeah.
can't remember if it was Nolan
Yeah, it was
or
Nolan.
Ewan. Yeah, where they kind of help each other out. Um, I think what people have to understand, just because Marty decided that he was going to play it this way, you can't expect that everybody else is going to be the same way. Like if you pull up to Jeff or pull up to Armando's pod, we may not have, and it's not fair, I think, for people to say, well, he didn't want to share his pod. Well, just because Marty or Joe or Nick did it, credit to them. You shouldn't expect that same treatment from somebody else. And if you don't get that courtesy, I don't think that gives you the right to shame that person.
No.
Because at the end of the day, when you think about it, and I credit, I mean, I hate to say this because I don't know how Marty feels about it, but it comes down to like, you kind of like cheated yourself out of possibly $7,000 by sharing your spot. Like it seems like, well, again, Matt
like
Coates
all three of them. They all
yeah,
three kind of beat the area up. You know what I mean? Who knows
Yeah.
if they all caught the biggest fish there, one
exactly.
guy.
So Matt Coates I probably would have wanted, but Marty Hughes could have easily ended up in second place because now Joe's not fishing there.
But the
now,
thing was, Marty wasn't using the right technique, and Joe kind of helped him out with that.
That's true.
That's
true. That's true. But that goes to the point where, like, and again, there's a lot of variables. I'm not saying Matty would have ended up in second place, but at the same time, I can't just because I put Marty on the pedestal as far as like, hey man, that's awesome. Brian Nelly, the same thing. Although Brian Nelly was clearly in the front runner, like nobody was threatening Brian Nelly's first place. So at that point, he was like, yeah man, nobody's gonna catch up to me at this point. You can have that spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that could have gone either way. And as an angler, we have to be ready for either decision.
Yeah.
And be cool with it. Because if you roll up there, and you have to know the area. I wasn't there. I didn't see this rock wall or whatever they were fishing. I don't know how many fish were there. I don't know how big it was, but sometimes you roll up and it's, a spot the size of a car sitting down there and it's one cast and there's no way you're sharing it with anybody. And you got to respect that. You got to pull off.
What is the minimum or that you have to be like, what's the minimum maximum distance between angling? Do you remember that rule?
No,
something
I don't
like
know.
50 yards or something like that, or 50 feet.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just more of a eyeballing etiquette. You know what I mean? Like, hey, don't come up on people, and if you're going to go around them, don't just turn and go 5 feet in front of them and cut them off. Like, give them a wide berth. But I've never really had a conflict with anybody out there. Every time as long as you talk, if you roll up on somebody without talking, you're in trouble. But if you as long as you talk, usually it works out okay, one way or the other.
Got a comment from Jeremy McCormick. Thanks for the Jeremy. If you're listening, let me know if I can share the story about you hooking yourself with that pulling a Matt Scotch kind of thing. Leave me in the comments. So let me know if I can show. Oh, here it is.
His two favorite podcasters. I'm gonna tell Ryan. I'm gonna tell Ryan that Armando's the new host of KBN.
He's like, Ryan who? Little premature, but excited to be able to enjoy the YouTube. Okay, so I can tell the story. So I was fishing with on Possum Kingdom on this past Monday after the tournament. Jeremy and I were just kind of like breaking new waters. And at the end, I'm packing up and Jeremy's kind of sloping on his seat and he's calling me. And I was like, come here, Armando. So I go up there and the guy's white as a ghost. Like he's as pale as a salamander. I'm like, are you okay? And he lifts up his thumb and sure enough, he pulled a Matt Scotch. And that treble hook went completely the barbed wire. So we were on YouTube trying to see if we can pull off that, pull with the brake line. Because, it's a thumb. It's a little bit more thicker skin than.
You couldn't cut it. Cut it. Wasn't far enough through to cut it.
Oh, no. This is where it gets interesting. So we were like back and forth. I called out a couple of people. Finally, I called out Carlos Torres from Lone Star Kayak Fishing. And I'm like, what do you think? It's only Lud. If it's in that cartilage between the finger and the nail, don't try the braid trick. Just push it completely through the other side. And Jeremy, I have Carlos on speaker, and I'm looking at Jeremy. And as I'm looking at Jeremy, Jeremy actually fainted, and I'm sorry, I have to share that, Jeremy. He passed out while he was getting out of the kayak. He sat down on the boat ramp. He's half submerged on the water, like the water, like he was laying on the boat ramp, and the waves were coming up to his shoulder. Like the only thing above the water, laying on the concrete, was his head.
He down there
Yeah.
baptizing people, trying to get hooks up.
He got up looking like, why am I wet? But anyways, credit to him. He actually, I mean, I was cringy. I was watching him little by little inch that treble hook all the way until it came up the other side. It made a mad out of him. So
yeah, well done, Jeremy.
I sent you the video. I didn't post it, Jeremy, because I didn't. It's kind of your video. I don't want to take credit for it, but whenever you want to post it, go ahead. Is there any?
I want to put it on KBN's.
Oh yeah, you'll get KBN famous for sure, for a good reason. Well, not a good reason, but not for a bad reason either. Is there any rule changes with giving or receiving certain baits during tournaments if that is what is working? Eric and Morris, we kind of touched on that, but go ahead and elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, Eric, as long as you're just giving. They're not asking. If you see your buddy over there struggling, you can go give them that white jackhammer and say, "Here you go, man. This is what's doing it." Now, whether they choose to accept it or not, who knows? But you can tell them. You can sure enough tell them that, and that's with the bass and Hobie rules. Local trails and stuff, I don't know what, there's too many nuances there. We're talking about the larger
national
trails.
Yeah. What have been some of your favorite national trails? Have you fished the native bass power hour? And what are your thoughts about that format? It's kind of like a MLF format.
I have not fished it, but I love it.
Are you going to fish it?
Yeah, I'm planning on coming to Fort in October.
You are?
Yeah.
And we get to see Blessed by Jeff Malott's present at Fork.
No, man, the Fork is that's the very first big tournament I ever went to was on Fork. Back way back. The first tournament of champions. It was called the PKAA Tournament of Champions. I love telling that story. That was the first big tournament I ever went to. It was the coolest thing. We were using digital cameras and all the, old school stuff, writing scores on note cards and stuff. So Fork holds a special place in my heart. So I'm going to go. But I love the format. I absolutely love the format. So I can't wait to do it.
Is that the one that was, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Possum King. Oh my God. Mark Pendergraph. Sorry, Mark, I'm tired. But is that the one Mark won? Is that everybody calls Mark Pendergraph the Possum King. Little known fact, Mark on Lake Fork.
He's good. Yeah.
He's really good at Lake Fork.
That was before he even started kayak fishing, man. That's how long ago that was. Who Steve Garcia is from Austin area?
I think I follow him and I heard his name, but I can't put a face.
He's an absolute legend down in Texas. I don't think he kayak fishes much anymore, but he won that first one down there on Fork, and that was 2013, maybe 2012.
Wow. 10 years now doing this.
And he won that first one, and fishing against all those guys. Some of the same guys are still out there. I still see some of the same guys out there fishing, but that was a cool event. So Fork always will hold a special place. And I've had some really good tournaments down there. One of the pre-Hobie TOCs, I came in top 5 down there on Fork. I've had another top 10 down there. So I've had some good days on Fork.
Are you surprised? I'm assuming you are, but I'll ask, somebody actually breaking Mark Pendergast's record. Like me and Christine were talking about it on captain's meeting, and she's like, she was like, nobody's gonna dethrone Mark Pendergraft. As far as maybe he's not gonna win, but nobody's gonna get. I think it was 208 inches that he got on the championship.
Yeah, that was so wild. We said that on the podcast with Michael and Joe. We were like, that felt like lightning in a bottle, flood, special situation. Mark had him stacked up on that ramp. That's never going to happen again. And by God,
lo and behold,
Michael just rolls out there, and he acts like he could have had 215. You know what I mean? Because he lost a bigger fish. I mean, he acts like he could have had even more. So unbelievable.
I think Michael doesn't get as much credit as he does. I know, like here in Texas, Guillermo, Matt, Mark, get a lot of the lion's share of the popularity because of what they've done. I think Michael now is more like local trails, but he is an absolute legend here.
Dude, Michael's one of the original TOC winners. He won that thing in like 2015 or something when Bo Reed was running it. I remember I was there. I remember him winning that. So he's been doing this, winning money for a while. You can catch him.
has always been that funny. That was, again, if you haven't listened to that episode, he stole the show on that one.
Yeah, I got him to tell the story on the podcast about that win and on Lake Fork back then, because he told a story about birds pushing bait towards him and how it was, the Lord looking down. It was the funny story then, still funny now. So
I, I don't have, like I said, I don't have a dog in that fight as far as who wins and all that between, Michael, Joe, and Marty, the top three. But I do feel like it was like the right thing that Michael wanted because of the way he fished it. Like there was no, sharing a spot. Like he had to wait till people that were actually fishing out of a boat and taking 5, 6, 8 pounders, according to him, out of the boat to fillet. Like those fish were not being released. These are people that are taking it in live and taking it home and cook, and they're taking 5, 6, 8 pounders out of that his pod, and he has to wait till everybody leaves. So hopefully there's still enough to win. That is pretty epic.
The favorite part of that interview is when he talked about how he had to act like he was hung up. He said he faked that he was hung up to block those trees so those guys couldn't fish there, because he's like, man, they're just wearing that spot out. So he did a little, now you see me, now you don't, tricked him, act like he was hung up.
That's hilarious. That's wisdom.
Yeah, that's right.
That we can all. Jeff, I appreciate we're kind of closing down. I have to ask you, what has been your favorite tournament that you fished?
Ever or this year?
Ever. Like whether you won or just had fun with it, what has been your favorite one that you've taken part of?
My favorite one ever probably is a Lake Fork TOC. Duke Tram was running this one, actually. Back, him and Cody Prather were running it. My son got to go with me, my oldest son, and he was down there with me, and I had a really good finish. Caught fish for, good fish for 2 days. Didn't win the tournament, but I came in top 5, had a good finish, got to hang out with my son for 4 days on Lake Fork. And that's probably my favorite one. But I've had so many fun times at different tournaments. I've had so many fun times at different tournaments. Another one that I won was on Table Rock, and that was because of my son. He gave me the juice, and I didn't believe him at first, but he gave me the juice, and I listened to what he said, and by God, I went up there and won the tournament.
What was the juice? Now I have to ask.
It was a big flutter spin, 50 feet of water.
Really?
Yeah, 50 feet of water, boat docks, flipping, letting a big flutter spin fall.
Wow.
That I bought at Lake Fork Tackle down there, but I brought it to Table Rock. And that son of a gun, it was a magical day, and won that on the old Kayak Bass series. It doesn't exist anymore, but that was one of the first pro trails too, or big time trails.
That was the first national trail, Kayak Bass series, right? Even before KBF.
Yep, sure enough.
I think a lot of people forget about that.
You talk about payments, dude. I won that tournament, and Terry Manley handed me an envelope with $3,000 cash. Just said, here you go. Right there on the spot after the tournament. I said, all right, man, this is how we do it. There's no 1 month PayPal waiting time or anything.
No tournament fees. Oh, no. PayPal fees. Let me ask you this. Have you ever, I know I'd never done it, but because I haven't kayak bass fished up until like 3 years ago, at least on tournaments. Have you ever done any of those trails before they would, I think that like the tournament director would show at the captain's meeting before launch and will bring, like, for example, a random item. It will be like 20 of them. Like I remember guys telling me that like the tournament director would be like, there were 20 of you, they would bring like 20 spoons.
Yeah.
So you had to take a picture with the spoon. And the reason for that is to prove that you were, you didn't have a old school picture.
Yeah, that's how AJ used to do it, man. That's how AJ and Jay used to do it over with Bluegrass back in the day.
Did you ever did one of those?
We didn't do that. I used to run tournaments here in Arkansas, and we did some different stuff, but we didn't do that. We had like little putt-putt golf scorecards, and we had digital cameras, So you'd have to write
your SD. Yeah, go ahead.
You'd have to write your score on the card, and we had buckets on a table at the weigh-in. So you would show up to the weigh-in, and you'd have to put your SD card in the 1 fish, 2 fish, 3 fish, 4 fish, 5 fish. So we didn't even bother checking the 1 fish. We'd always check the 5 fish buckets. But the game was all the people at the weigh-in are standing there waiting to see, oh, here comes Jeremy. Let's see if he puts it into 5 fish, because I know so-and-so got this many. That was pre-Tourney X. You're just trying to see if you had, 4 or 5 or whatever. And you'd sit there for 2 hours with a laptop looking at SD cards. So
that's fun times, man. Do you miss that?
No. You know what I do miss though is everybody came to the captain's meeting and
Yes.
everybody came to the weigh-in and sat
Yeah.
around there for hours. We do it at big restaurants, big parking lots, whatever, and you were there. So I do miss that part.
I do feel bad for the so I live here in Texas. I leave like an hour and 30 minutes, well, 2 hours from the my launch at Possum Kingdom. So I got there before, check my board. And I told Steve, like, I want to stay for the captain's meeting. And I feel bad because I feel like I should stay. But I was like, man, I'm not staying in the lake. I'm staying 2 hours. And then for the award ceremony, it was like, I had to cut a deal with the wife. It's like, okay, you can fish it, but you need to be back for dinner because we have dinner with friends and all that. So I missed the award, and I really would have wanted to be there to kind of support the Texas anglers, like Michael and Joe, and the top five. Four of the top five were from Texas. Matt Fletz, and I forgot who's the fourth, who ended up in. It was Marty Houston. I forgot who ended up in fourth, and I think Matt Fletz ended up in fifth. So I felt bad that I wasn't there. I think I need to be a bigger effort to try to be there for the awards, whether I win or not. The last time I saw that there was a huge attendance, ironically enough, was for the Bassmaster Kayak Series, the first one at Possum Kingdom, where, oh my God, who was the tournament director? I forgot his name. Oh my God, he was diagnosed with cancer. What was his name? I had my name on the top of my head. Anyways, local Texas legend. He was a tournament director. And I remember it was like only the top three show up because it was COVID. It was like, we'll just call the top three and that's it. And then turns out like all 200 people showed up and their families.
Yeah.
So it was fun. I like that. And there was no food or anything. Not like last year when they had like the pizza.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I want to tell you one more thing. And I've said this on KBN before, but this is one other thing I miss. I wish they'd bring this back. They never will, but we used to do parking lot shotgun starts.
Yes. Kind of like the Hobie Fishing World.
No, I'm talking about parking lot in your vehicle.
Really?
Yes. At Lake Fork TOC. You've been to Lake Fork Marina, right?
Yes.
So there'd be 100 trucks and cars in there in that gravel crammed in there. And Bo Reed would pop off a gun and everybody would haul ass to their spots in the dark. And dudes were getting stuck in the ditches and speeding and dust flying everywhere. Those good times. Very dangerous, but they don't do that anymore either.
I have to ask you one more question, and I know I'm going to get flack from Steve-O for this because I mentioned this on the episode with me and Dan. He messaged me immediately, but I'm going to bring it up again. So sorry, Steve-O. I do have an issue, and again, it's not against Steve or Tony X and all that, but I do wish there could be something done with the deadline submitted. I really believe it takes so much enjoyment out of fishing the trail when you catch your limit, and you may have a winning limit, maybe not, but now you're playing that game where it's like, I don't have a signal. What do I do? Do I leave my spot early? Do I chance it? Do I want to keep fishing? I'm on the bite is on fire, but it's close. And Steve will message me and kind of explain it, and he's going to be here, I think, in 2 weeks from now. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but I wanted to take your thoughts on it. I understand Steve-O's point of view. As a tournament director, I get it, like logistics of judging so many fish, and if the lake doesn't have any signal and people just submitted after lines out, and you give him like an hour after lines out, he is just flanked in all angles, and now it's a rush to try to judge fish, and that's where mistakes happens. And I get all that. What do you think is a good, do you think that's a problem, just having 30 minutes after lines out to submit a fish? And if you do, what do you think, what is your idea of a good way to solve that?
I've always liked an hour.
I know.
I've always liked an hour. 30 minutes is enough if you plan for it. You know what I mean? If you plan for it, because where you're fishing, where you have signal and where you don't. You know what I mean? If you on the way there, when you lose bars. On the water, where you lose bars, and they're using Tourney X, so you can live well everything. And as soon as you get the signal, just pop. You don't have to go through and individually submit them all.
I couldn't use live well on Possum Kingdom, and that's why they extended it that day. Which you could move. I mean, but I couldn't use live well. Like really? I tried. No, I would have. I submitted to live well, and then I went to submit to put it on the net when I had signal. They were gone. They disappeared. They were like that were never there. I
Right.
even have, when I opened the live well, I even have like fish from past tournaments that I put in the live well that were still there from like a year ago. And I was like, oh my God, let me not make sure I don't confuse this, but it
Yeah.
does, it
That's
does.
tough, man.
Yeah.
The bass boat side of things, the elites and MLF, they only go to lakes with strong signal now. Like they make that part of their deal
Yeah.
because they have to for live streaming on TV and all that. I don't want us to ever get to that point. We
No.
want to still go where we want to go. But yeah, a little extra time wouldn't hurt, especially on day one. You know what I mean? Like on day
Yeah.
one,
It's like,
you know what I mean? On day one, push that thing out an hour. Day two, cut it to 30.
put it to, they won't put you like 2 hours. Like, it doesn't matter because it's like,
Yeah,
that's
you're
what I
not.
was like. Day two, I kind of understand, but I still wish like maybe launch 30 minutes prior. Like, I think a lot of it, I don't know if it has to do with insurance policies and all that, but it used to be that we would launch when it was dark and paddle out, and we were casting when it was still dark. Now I've noticed, and I don't know because of the time changes, now that it's summer, daylight is earlier. But I've noticed lately that it's more like, no, even on Cottle Lake, which is still technically winter, we were launching, we were kind of daylight still by the time we got to launch. And it used to be that we could launch when it was dark. We launch like 5:30 instead of now launching at 6. And I wish they would go back to that, but I get the feeling that has a lot to do with the insurance, and they don't want kayakers out there at night where they're more prone, which is, I get that part, but it also, there's a lot less people, there's a lot less boaters on the water
Yeah,
when it's dark.
I always like us getting out there if we know, especially if you know there's a basketball
Yeah.
tournament, you want us to be at least 30 minutes to an hour ahead of their start.
Yeah.
So you're not having to, because we ain't beating anybody to a spot.
Yeah.
We want to be to our areas before we're racing them, and they're running all over the lake.
And even you can get run over. I mean, if you ever been at a boat launch, lines launch time at a basketball tournament, I mean, it's crazy.
Ooh, especially in the spring or fall when that fog's on the water, it's scary.
I've been on Lake Fork on a Monday, and I've seen basketball tournaments. I'm like, it's not even a holiday.
Man,
It's a basketball tournament on a Monday.
Man, I've been on some weather out there. That place will scare you to death if you're out there in some bad weather. But anyway.
Talk about bad weather. It scares me is the 15 feet crocodiles. I'm exaggerating, but there it is, double-digit feet crocodiles out there. That's for sure.
But
anyways,
I've never seen one. All the years I've been there, I've still never seen a
I think
gator.
It's Caney Creek. If you go up Caney Creek,
I've been up in there. I've been in every damn creek on that lake, and I hadn't seen one, but I know they're in there.
No, the last tournament not the last tournament, but the first Bassmaster Kayak Series when I pre-fished it, dude, I ran into some like prehistoric monsters that I was like, it's like what you call like primal fear. Like I wasn't scared. And I just had this primal fear that this animal, if it decided that I was on their menu, there was nothing I can do.
When we get off here, I'm gonna send you a picture of me and my son from back in the day on Fork, like waist deep, wading through some pads, trying to get back in some stuff in pre-fishing. I'll say it'll freak you out.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah,
no, I wouldn't do that now. Johnny Maddox, thanks you for commenting. That was insane, driving like a madman. I think he was referring to the, launching from the
road.
The road. Yeah.
Mad Max.
Jeff, thank you so much, man. I do always like to give my special guest a few minutes to give you a shout out, your plug-in. So take as much time as you want.
Oh no, man. I appreciate the time coming on here. And anyone's watching on my YouTube channel, because now this software allows us to stream it to our own personal channel. So if you're watching on my channel, I appreciate you watching over there. Appreciate you guys following on my own channel. Of course, KBN on Monday nights. Come over and check us out. Armando's been on a few times. He's been a guest host before over there with us, helping out on some shows. So we appreciate you over there, Armando, and always mixing it up in the comments there. And then sponsor-wise, I've been on the Old Town team for years. I appreciate them. I'm on the Temple Fork Outfitters team down in Texas, the rods down there. Love the TFO rods. My man Guillermo helping design those. And then I recently just got added to the Dugout team. I know they sponsor our podcast, but I haven't been on the Dugout team officially until now. So I'm on the Dugout team now. But yeah, other than that, man, just keep on keeping on with what you're doing. Appreciate what you guys do at Bass Kayak and Beers. Appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate it. And I was wondering why the uptick in, and watch. I was like, man, like Jeff bringing the sex appeal. I got a lot, but it's just because you share it to you. So I appreciate you sharing it to your,
man,
to your.
It'll save me from having to upload. I usually upload on Fridays, but I'll do it next Friday and use this instead.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time. Good luck. What's your next tournament out there?
Man, I hurt my back at Kentucky Lake. I had to leave after day one.
50 years old.
I'm telling you, and I'm shut. I had to. I'm shutting down tournaments for the summer, which sucks.
Really?
Because I was doing pretty good. I had some good finishes in the BOS and was doing okay. But yeah, I'm done for the summer. I'm gonna make a comeback in the fall. My plan is hopefully to go to Rayburn in September and then Fork in October. That's my hope.
Father Time's still unbeaten, buddy.
I'm telling you, after I get right, I got to get right.
Well, hope you get right soon, man. And again, thank you for joining us. And for those out there listening and watching, we do really appreciate it. Give us a follow, Bass Kayak and Beers, on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, KBN, Jeff Malott, and Ryan Lambert. You can follow them on YouTube, Facebook. You guys don't do TikTok. You do Instagram.
Yeah,
right?
we have TikTok, but we're pretty slow on TikTok. We don't do much over there.
50-year-old on TikTok. That's impressive, man. That's groundbreaking. All right. So if you're going to be on the water, please wear your PFDs. If you're going to have a couple of beers while you're at it, just please make sure you drink responsibly. Make it back home to your loved ones. Everybody have a great day. Peace out.